Christy Merrick. I'm the director of the Natural Start Alliance, and I wanted to welcome you to this session and thank especially Ann Stiers from the Juniper Hill School and all of her panelists for pulling this session together, really to come and meet a need right now. Schools, as I'm sure you know, are really struggling right now with how to bring children back to school. We know that's where they need to be, but we're thinking about how we do that in ways that are safe for children and families, for teachers, and also in ways that just don't continue to propagate this pandemic. And a lot of schools are starting to look outside their doors at outdoor spaces that they maybe haven't used for education before. But there are a lot of schools that aren't sure how to do it. So as it happens, our community of nature-based educators are experts at that. We know how to teach children outdoors in ways that are safe and effective and inclusive, and we're really finding our community stepping up to meet this moment, including people like Ann Stiers. She's part of the advisory team for Inside Outside, which is an nature-based learning group connected to Antioch University. And they just put out a really wonderful policy statement on outdoor learning as a response to COVID. And we were just really happy that we could provide a platform through this conference to continue the conversation with this panel. And really, we hope that the whole conference is a platform to continue this conversation. We have over 100 sessions this year at this conference about teaching children outdoors. And this session, of course, is a really important part of that. So thank you so much, Anne, and all of the panelists for being here to help us get this conversation started today. I'm going to hand it over to you. Just quickly before I do, I just want to mention that they have hi, Anne. Anne has brought a lot of moderators with her today to help facilitate the conversation in the chat. I can see that they're already doing that. So please feel free to use the chat all through the panel to have conversations on the side and to ask your questions. They have quite a few people to help facilitate that, to really make the most of our time today. And if you're having any kind of tech issues, just send a chat to NAAEE staff, and we can help you with any kind of issues that might come up. But thank you so much, Anne, and all the panelists. We're really excited to hear this conversation.
Thank you, Christy, and Emily and Kit and the hardworking Natural Start team. You'll see that Kit is helping to monitor the chat, and Emily is that NAAE staff there. And Christy, thank you so much for that introduction. I also want to shout out to the colleagues at Antioch University and Inside Outside, as well as the thousands of amazing fellow educators across the state of Maine, where I'm from, but really all across the country. I'm honored to be here with you, speaking on behalf of children, families, and teachers that we are fortunate enough to work with every single day. We hope soon again. Each and every one of them has a right to play, learn, and be in the natural world. Having access to nature and the outdoors, no matter where that is, in a park, in a nearby nature center, next door in that little section of the schoolyard, wherever that might be, is a basic human right. That is my why regarding nature and outdoor learning for schools, for all, and now and into the future. So I just want to share with you some slides as an introduction to our incredible panelists who have joined us from all over today. And I'm going to get started doing that. So I just want to say that this session is titled Outdoor Learning, a Solution for Schools During COVID-19, and really it is a solution. There are so many things that are being talked about, but we offer this as a solution for all of you, and certainly not without its difficulties or pitfalls, or it's not a panacea necessarily, but it is an offering. So I just wanted to say that that slide of that snowdrop there, the beginning of spring, kind of where we were back in March, I discovered with a group of kindergartners 3 years ago that there is indeed a green heart on the inside of every snowdrop. So see if you can discover that next March if you have snowdrops in your area or whenever they may grow. So I'm going to link right now to the Inside Outside page. Let's see if I can do this and exit out of my slides for a minute. Outdoor learning across the country, really, what is possible? And this is the question that we really are asking ourselves, and what my colleagues and I asked this very question in developing the position statement. So for some reason, my desktop split, so it's been a little bit hilarious trying to find everything right now. I'm not the most tech savvy person, so here we go. Sorry for this glitch. There it is. So I just want to share with you a pretty remarkable website. In addition to Natural Start, which of course is a fabulous resource, there's also the Inside Outside organization has an amazing website that Liza Lowe has really been primarily responsible for developing. And in this is the position statement. Let's see a little bit. This works so well when I was practicing. Here we go. So the position statement is under the news tab. And you can see that for those of you who haven't had a chance to explore this, it has active links for all of the research looking at time outdoors, protecting against virus transmission, looking at positive academic outcomes, and looking at mental health benefits, which of course are a huge concern as we return to school after this time away. So we also offer outdoor half days, looking at sample schedules involving the community. And again, some links to some incredible films, documentary films that really bring nature-based education to life. I will say as a disclaimer that this panel that I'm about to introduce to you is based mostly in New England. Thank you, Anna, for being from farther afield. Based mostly in New England context where COVID-19 numbers have been stabilizing and are actually some of the lowest in the country. So, and we obviously have a lot of potential access to the outdoors in our more rural regions of these 3 states. So I just, as a disclaimer, so you will have that perspective as we move into our conversation here very soon. So I just want to say thank you, Liza, again, for this incredible website that you've created. So okay, I'm going to go back to the slides. There it is. Okay, so we have work to do, right? But this is possible. The several colleagues that I mentioned, the list is actually kind of too long to list all of them, but based in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, we asked that question, like I said, what else is possible? So I would say that now that this statement is out there, it's been out there since early July. It has gone out to state education departments, principals, superintendents, teachers, funders, and interested other stakeholders, such as community health organizations. I've been working pretty closely with one, which I'll mention in a moment, that has really been spreading the word about this work. So I'm going to share just some examples very briefly of outdoor classrooms, because this is one possible pivot. And this might be a time when Eliza can put, if she hasn't already, a link to what she titled a quick pivot toward doing outdoor learning in her corner of Vermont. It's a mini slideshow that she's willing to share with all of you about that quick pivot. So we really have this possibility, right, to be able to create outdoor classrooms no matter where we are. And yes, there are hurdles to doing so, but there are a lot of resources and a lot of people who've been doing this now across the country, as Natural Start has so beautifully been portraying over the several years of this major spike in growth of nature learning. So being able to see pre-kindergarten through first, second, third, fourth, fifth graders outdoors, and yes, we'll get the perspective of having some middle schoolers outdoors as well with our principal here who came to us from middle school. We hope this session will be inspiring and supportive to you. There's nothing more important to me than to witness the stunning growth of children connected to the natural world with its myriad of learning opportunities, benefits from inherent risks, and deep consciousness of teaching tolerance and consent as well as trauma-informed and equity, diversity, teaching, and learning. That is a long sentence, but that is how passionately I feel that outdoor learning can really contribute to our betterment as humans, and also in connection to the earth. So let's get started with our panelists, but not without a little levity, of course. So maybe these topics of inspiration and all these wonderful things that nature-based learning can give us, but maybe these are really what you want to learn about. So what about that gear, and how does that, limit and change depending on where we're located? How about toilets anyway? What do we do? And then clearly, depending on where you live in the region, ticks are a big question for many people as they step out of a school building or off school grounds. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists. I need to figure out how to stop sharing my screen. I no longer have, maybe you can help me, Emily. I no longer have a spot that says stop sharing.
Can you check bottom of your screen?
Yeah, there's nothing there. So, okay, hold on.
Hold on one second.
Yep, I got it. Thank you all. So I would love to welcome our 4 panelists at this point. So I couldn't hear you laughing at my toilet slide, but I know it's a big deal for many of you. It's sort of the first question people ask stepping outside the school doors. And now we've got a bigger one, right? Like, what do we do about COVID in this time too? So I'm just providing a little bit of smiles for all of you as we try to do this difficult work of pivoting in such a short time. So I just want to introduce the 4 panelists. If you could start your videos at this point. I want to introduce Dr. Andy Russ. He sent me a great bio, which I'm just going to go ahead and read because it gave me a good chuckle. I will say, as a little bit of a disclaimer, Andy is one of my son's doctors, pediatrician, since he was very young. Actually diagnosed him with whooping cough when he was very, very little, 3 months old, in fact. So long time relationship with Dr. Russ, and he's beloved pediatrician in my community here in Lincoln County, Maine. But he is almost a Maine native, a long time and lifelong adventurer, and father of 3 active teenagers. I love this, husband of 1 active wife, which I know very well. Very active runners, all of them in that family, and devoted Lincoln County pediatrician for the last and next, which I was glad to read, 15 years. So Andy's also been serving as a healthcare advisor in a group of Lincoln Health or healthcare practitioners and Lincoln County school leadership in my little corner of Maine. And that's been a pretty incredible group of folks just working together around all kinds of issues from April until now. And I just did a presentation for that group last week on outdoor learning. So we're hoping that pivot will happen for some of those schools pretty quickly. Marie Robinson has become a friend, is a colleague. I'm honored to say that she is now superintendent of the Katahdin schools and principal up there in northern Maine, and is just doing remarkable work with trying to get her teachers doing some more outdoor learning there, and they also are guiding her. So several of them came to visit Juniper Hill School last year. It was wonderful to have you. So Marie is superintendent of Katahdin schools, like I said, lives and works up in northern Maine. She also is currently a PhD student focusing on learning, instruction, and innovation, and very connected to nature-based learning, and has been in this field for over 20 years. So it's super important to her to be able to get this shift to outdoor learning happening as well, not just with her region, but in a larger context. So Anna, I just wonder if you are here. Ah, there you are. So Anna, can you help me, because I didn't read the chat? Is it what I think it is?
Yeah, it's Dookie. Yep.
Okay, thank you. I was having a little panic last night. I was like, I need to ask her. So Anna Dookie is here with us this morning, coming to us from Minnesota. So running outside the New England region. So thank you for joining us. She teaches preschool, nature preschool at a public elementary school in Minnesota, and enjoys collaborating with kindergarten and 5th to 5th grade colleagues around outdoor learning. She's really a champion. I'm, very humbled in her little bio here, but she has been had a leadership role in Minnesota Eco, in MN Eco. She's been advocating for and supporting traditional childcare programs and schools in Minnesota to utilize outdoor spaces, and especially during this COVID-19 work. And I know that the Equity Toolkit will make its way to the resources at the end of this session too, I'm hoping. So one of the authors and work there has just been remarkable. And last but not least, Owen Bradley, who I can't wait to meet in person someday. I know the other three pretty well from lots of different places, but Owen came to us as a recommendation by my dear colleague and friend Amy Butler, also on this call as a supporter and a co-author of the position statement. And so Owen came to public education, I love this description, as a dropout prevention counselor for at-risk youth in 1991. And of course, worked pretty hard to change just those names alone to work on really supporting those youth. And he helped to create Montpelier Public Schools community-based learning program, so a champion of this work already in connection to community. And this program apparently is still thriving today. So I know that he has got a wonderful bio, which has a lot on it. And I will just say that the reason that we pulled him in today is the very impressive work to try and do 100% outdoors for the middle school that he is principal of in Vermont. Currently the principal at White River Valley Middle School in Bethel, Vermont. So, and I know has worked very closely with North Branch Nature Center Eco program over the years with Amy. So welcome all of you. I'm thrilled to have you. If you would just, I think what we'll do is I'll offer for you to now talk about your role in this work really, and the connection for your why as to why did you say yes to joining this panel, both from the position statement sort of side of things, but also just to be able to offer to our participants a little more information about you and your connection to this work. So again, just 2 or 3 minutes. So why don't we start with Anna?
Thank you, Anne. It's an honor to be here. About 6 years ago, I started a nature-based preschool in Minnesota. And just a little bit different, Minnesota does have a lot of access to outdoor spaces, but this particular school, it was just a 1/4 acre of land in a little courtyard that went around the building. It was a horseshoe shape. And that's where we did our nature-based preschool. So it was 2.5 hours and it was inclusive. So we had early childhood special education students as part of that. And through that year, I really realized that one, nature-based education can happen anywhere. And anyone who's heard me talk knows I refer to Emma Maris's TED Talk, Nature is Everywhere. And it's all about redefining the importance of defining how we define nature. And so making sure that we're not thinking about just those wild places. Otherwise, unfortunately, a lot of people won't have access to nature-based education. And then the second thing was about the benefits of nature for all children. So we really did, the students came to us with a variety of needs, and to see their success in ways that wasn't possible indoors really made me passionate about advocating for that for all students. It can be challenging at times in finding ways to adapt and accommodate students and their needs, but it is possible and it should be happening. So that's my why. And so once COVID hit, we in Minnesota, the nature-based educators in Minnesota got together and have been working on supporting other programs and getting outdoors and utilizing their outdoor spaces for the safety of the teachers and the adults, families, if they're a family childcare provider, you know, people are coming into their home, that's stressful. So trying to really help them be successful, but then also the students. There's a lot of stress happening right now, and there's a lot of benefits to being outdoors in nature that can overcome that. So we've been working on doing that. So I've shared in the chat there, but that toolkit, it started out geared towards childcare programs, and now we're shifting and thinking about fall and schools opening and making adjustments to that to put it on the lens of a classroom teacher.
So great. I didn't know what a big deal Anna was when she came to visit my school last year. I was like, oh, I love talking with people. And then it just sort of blew so humble. My gosh, it's wonderful to have you up here last year. So thank you, Anna. So I wondered if Dr. Russ, could you, or Andy, not used to calling you by your first name.
Sure. Thank you all for having me. I am certainly by no means an expert in outdoor education, nor am I an expert in COVID planning, and that is because nobody is. So I just wanted to read to you quickly a statement that came from the Maine Department of Education. And it's amazing to me, I was reading through the framework of the Maine's reopening plan, and this is similar to reopening plans across the country. And this is buried within a multi-page framework. And the quote is, encourage visionary risk takers to create non-traditional models and plans. This is a time for innovation and big thinking. And so for the state general framework to have something sort of that progressive is pretty amazing. And that is, from my read, that is a call to you folks to make this happen. This is an opportunity to really harness the power of this group to make outdoor education part of the recovery plan. We know as pediatricians, we know as parents, as people, that there are one of the greatest impacts of this pandemic is going to be the social and emotional effects on our children and our communities. And those social and emotional impacts have a potential to be long-term if we don't do something about it. And we also know, and you all know well, that one of the well-known benefits to outdoor education, nature-based education, environmental-based education is the social and emotional benefits. Not to undersell the benefits to the academic part of it, but certainly the social and emotional benefits are well studied and well proven, and it is going to be part of the solution to coming out of this hole that we're in. And again, if you've read any of your frameworks, whatever state or wherever you're coming from, you know that buried within those frameworks says something like, consider outdoor education, almost as an afterthought. And I think we should move that to the top of the agenda. So anyway, thank you all.
Thank you so much, Andy. In fact, the CDC, Annie Pat was telling me, this is one of the other folks that Andy and I have been working with on this Lincoln Health and school leadership group of folks. And she said that it has moved to the top in some of the new CDC guidelines, which is great. And you have some requests to put Pender-Makin's or the DOE's framework, that quote into the chat, if you wouldn't mind. That would be great. So let's move over to Vermont. We're going to jump over to Vermont and then move back to Maine, Marie. So we're going to start with Owen. If you could just let us know your connection to this work. And I know that you could probably tell us a novel because you've been so connected for so long, but we're going to try and keep it short.
Yeah, thank you. And I too am humbled to be here. And I believe as a school principal, my job is to help create the conditions so students and teachers can learn and grow. I believe the best place to learn and grow is outdoors, and that I have seen adults and kids thrive that thought they would fail. I believe helping kids have a relationship with the outdoors and adults is going to help us save our planet. And I think it's essential that we work on that at all times. I am a big advocate of outdoor learning. In 21 years as a school principal, all 3 schools I've been at, I've helped create the conditions to go outside. I'm really proud of that. And I want to be remembered as a school principal that sent the kids out to play. As one of 13 children, my mother always just said, go out and play. And we did. And we went in the woods and the brooks, and we're butted up against 71 acres in Lucky in Bethel, Vermont. I can go on and on, like Ann said, but I'll reel it in there, and there's plenty to talk about and share.
So wonderful. Thank you for that, Owen. I know that you've been a mentor for Amy, and she's such a dear friend. I can see it through, just even through the screen. So Marie, speaking of mentors, I think we're kind of, I don't know who gets the title. You're kind of mentor for me. So Marie, would you describe your why?
Sure. First of all, I am very, very excited to be here, and it's wonderful to see the growth in this area. As soon as I started talking, you're probably thinking there's no way she's from Maine, and you're exactly right. I did move up here from right outside of Philadelphia 4 years ago, accepting a principal position. So I was pre-K to 12 principal, and really excited to move to northern Maine, where it's very rural, and immediately anticipated lots of outdoor learning happening. And when I arrived, everyone was inside. And concurrently, I've been working on my PhD around nature and learning. So I've been doing all the research. Also, as Owen mentioned, I spent tons of time in the woods as a child and just loved all that experience and wanted to bring that to children everywhere. So I had an English teacher who was like-minded at the time, who has since moved on, but is doing great things in our region. But I turned to her and said, what do you think about taking some of your English classes outside? So that was in 2016. At this point, we now have a middle school outdoor ed program. We have a high school outdoor ed program. I've become the superintendent and now, but scaled back my principalship to just the elementary, where we are heavily focused on pre-K, K1, and spreading that into all of the elementary school to really highlight the benefits of outdoor learning. And as everyone mentioned, the benefits are tremendous, but I think one thing we have to keep in mind as public school educators and administrators is the ability for nature to recontextualize our learning and get away from the isolation of worksheets that we have become so such an expert at delivering to students. I think it's time to break free from that. So those are some of the reasons why I'm here, and I'm very thrilled. And I also have a session tomorrow to share some more about how to spread this to your school. So thank you all again for having me.
So great. Thank you, Marie. And thank you for mentioning about your session. Also, Anna has at least one session, maybe two. And Marie, yes, she has a session as well. So thank you again for being here. I would just say that all of these people, and you included, Andy, are visionary risk takers and are doing some really wonderful things for their communities and beyond. So thank you. So we're going to move into asking a bunch of questions, sort of a facilitated portion, and then we welcome during this time for folks to ask questions of these panelists in the chat. If it's for a specific person, if you could put their name next to your question, that would be very helpful. So thank you all again. We have been, really thinking a lot about at this point, thinking about, and this is really a question for the teacher leaders and administrators in the room, that at this point, what are you and your teams planning for in terms of outdoor learning time? So what do potential schedules look like, different age and grade levels, and you may not know yet. And this is like a moving target daily and nightly for all of us right now. But I wonder if we just start with you, Anna, and just if you've got some things that you've been offering to people, or you yourself in your school, what are some of the things you're talking about in terms of outdoor learning time and then potential schedules at different levels? So that's for you, Anna.
Is that for panelists or for the larger group?
That's just for Anna right now, and then I want to ask it of all of you, so that would be great. We're going to kind of go up in the age levels here.
Yeah, so well, right now what I'm seeing kind of through Miniko and through the teachers that I work with in my schools is it's very teacher driven. So teachers are taking that initiative to move their classrooms outdoors for their own safety, and they are getting administrator support in doing so. So they're kind of proposing the plan, and then administrators are exploring that option and finding ways to help them be successful. So right now it is about kind of the focus on where are we gonna be outside? So teachers are kind of focusing on that elements, looking at their school grounds, looking at nearby parks, finding out what that space could look like. And then depending on the number of teachers, they're working creatively through that, right? So some schools don't have as much land, so they're thinking about how can we share these spaces and then work together. And then now what I'm seeing is in the last week or two, so Minnesota's plans are going to be released on the 30th. So as we're getting closer to that, I'm seeing a lot more interest in administrators that are saying, okay, we need something. Teachers aren't quite feeling comfortable with just this mask rule or screens in the classroom. They're not kind of get sold on that. Hand washing isn't going to be enough. So they're looking at other ways to help address teachers' concerns about safety. So now more administrators are seeking out input and exploring what does outdoor learning look like in preschool? What could that look like in 5th grade? So that's kind of where things are at right now. I think as the plans are officially announced, then teachers are going to start looking at their actual daily schedule and thinking about when does it make sense to do this? And just like in a non-pandemic time, they're thinking about routines and transitions and making that as smooth and seamless as possible. Some of those same things that you should consider with outdoor learning are still true even during the pandemic. So they're kind of exploring those options.
Thank you, Anna. I'd love to hear what's happening at the middle school level, Owen, for you in particular. What are some things that are going on in your school?
Yeah, so I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but we're in a pandemic. So I feel like everything's on the table for creativity. In the safest place, I believe, and I'm responsible for 150 children and 30 adults, and I take it very seriously, their safety. Our plan is if we are at school, we are outdoors full time. We have 150 kids, so we're looking at 15 tents that will be needed, or some outdoor presence. We have 71 acres. We will break into pods of 10 kids or less with 2 adults in each pod for redundancy and for bathroom breaks and other many good reasons. We plan on, the group will base all their work in outdoor education when they're on campus, and they'll also work from a reparative practices model of a circle, which a lot of outdoor educators use to begin with. Everybody will start the day with a campfire and end the day with a campfire of some sort and gratitude. We're going to draw on all that North Branch Nature Center stuff that Amy and company have built so powerfully. We are also know that we need to be safe. So one of the first things we'll do is teach safety. We are also going to do a literacy program outdoors, and it's going to be based in anti-racism. Both of these things, the racism and the outdoor education piece, I think we were maybe given lemons, and usually people make lemonade, but we like to make things that are delicious and hard to make, so we're making lemon meringue. And, you know, we're going to need things like bug spray, and coolers, and fans, and on, and we have a bunch of people working on all that stuff. We're pretty excited, but we also know that this needs to be flexible and all along the way. So, by the way, to go to the bathroom, the way we're going to do it, being that it is a temporary program, we're also planning to go to Thanksgiving outdoors. And we're looking at 2 to 3 days a week outdoors full time. One of the things we're doing, every group's going to have their own portalet, which is not the greatest way, but it might be the safest way. And they're all going to learn how to clean things and back out and take care of the place you're in, whether it's at the woods or the portalet. Is that helpful?
Right. These are the details that that maybe when we move into asking some of the questions that folks are asking, participants are asking, that's often what people are asking about, those kind of details. If we're not outdoorsy, how do we get out? How do we do this? And what about going to the bathroom? So just to ask Marie, I don't know if at the high school level or if you want to talk about just in general any of the schedules for the schools that you oversee.
Yeah, we are still in the planning phases, and I would say at this point we are looking really to move a lot of the elementary and potentially middle school to outdoor spaces. And I've also been able to secure some outdoor tents. I'm getting some information around adding we have 1 outdoor pavilion at the middle high school. I'm looking to add to those. We've had some support with the Friends of Katahdin Woods and Waters, and that's been a huge assistance in developing this, but we don't have specific schedules set yet, but we are very lucky to have an amount of, lots of space around us, and that's going to afford us the opportunity to be outside, but have the building there. We're also fortunate to have small class sizes in the schools that I'm in, so being indoors is not, I would say, as potentially risky as it may be in some larger districts. So we do have a lot of things going for us. But yeah, those are some of the preliminary plans, and I have teachers just emailing me left and right with ideas and screenshots of things they're going to need. So it's exciting, even in the midst of this pandemic, for sure.
Thank you all. I'm very aware that we are focusing, obviously our panels, we couldn't have everyone available on such short notice. So the quick turnaround time, and I'm very aware that there are definitely participants in the conference and people across the country, obviously, who are trying to figure out how to do this in an urban environment. So I wonder if, and I have a question for you, Dr. Russ, in just a little minute. But Anna, have you been working with any districts in urban environments that you could speak to? I mean, I have, but I want to hear from you. So just to hear what those folks are considering and doing.
Yeah, there's been a couple of things. One is, utilizing the parking lot space and, trying to push the cars and vehicles away to open up more space for classes to gather. Bringing in things like planters and raised bed gardens around in those parking lot areas in order to create some more natural elements in those spaces. One program for the summer program is looking at getting a shipping container. Due to the location of the school, they weren't able to leave their natural loose parts out for the children to play with. So they got a shipping container, and we're looking at moving the materials in and out every day. So the children were still able to get those loose parts and have access to those things, but then still making sure that they're meeting the needs of the school, which was to keep the building safe during off school hours. So there has been a lot of creativity about that. And then again, one of the first places I start with schools is looking at a Google map, kind of zooming out and finding those green spaces that might be a block away. Sometimes it is privately owned. It might be a church owns it or a private homeowner owns it. And then figuring out how do you approach those people and seek out access to the space.
I would say that's what our commissioner in the state of Maine is talking about, right? Visionary, risk taker energy, such as that, Anna. So thank you for highlighting those folks who are doing that. I do have a colleague in Boston who is looking at actually putting a yurt on the parking lot, which is what we use for our indoor-outdoor classrooms here at Juniper Hill to stay warm in the wintertime and to house classroom materials and such. So I think it's going to happen. So it's kind of incredible. And again, also highlighting those green spaces, and they may be postage stamp size, but it is something, and it's definitely a way for folks to get to green areas. So thank you for that. So I'm just going to pivot a little bit and ask some questions about this, which I know you're probably deflect, Dr. Russ, but here's the question. So how much safer is being outdoors in terms of likelihood of infection spread in terms of COVID-19?
82% safer. and
Not what we want to hear.
98% safer. You know that 112% of statistics are made up anyway, but it is clear. So in the early days of the pandemic, one of the things that we in the hospital did is try to figure out the air exchange times for every single one of our rooms, whether it was an operating room or CAT scan room or an exam room or meeting room. And clearly there's no better place to have good air exchange than outside. And so that removes many of those questions. There is, as I mentioned earlier, that the data changes every day in terms of the safety, the transmissibility of the illness to kids, to younger kids, to older kids. And we're not talking about eliminating risk clearly by going outside, but we're talking about dramatically reducing risk by improved air exchange, by just the ability to distance and all of those other things, all of the simple things that we're trying to do in our closed spaces will be made that much easier by going outside. So it's not a very specific answer, but clearly the answer is much safer.
Thank you for that. I feel like I planted that question, but I didn't even actually write that one. So thank you. I think that's really reassuring and can be very helpful for families and for teachers who will be teaching kiddos. So in terms of thinking about being outside with children, what are some COVID-19 protective guidelines that we should have in mind? And so I would just direct this right to you, Dr. Russ, first, and then I'd love to hear from any of you, Owen, Anna, or Marie, about things that you're considering already and thinking about being outdoors and COVID guidelines.
So I sort of missed the detail of the question, but in terms of other necessary steps that need to be taken to make outdoor spaces safer. It's not going to completely do away with the recommendation for kids to be masked, for example. In Maine, there are recommendations for everybody to be masked from kindergarten on and probably pre-K on. There is time being built into schedules for mask breaks. And certainly I think that you know, being outside and being distanced will allow people to have those mask breaks, and people can interpret that innovatively and have long mask breaks that might be an hour long. And so that's one way. And I guess the other thing to sort of consider is when we think about outside, we think about kids touching things and kids touching things in common surfaces that they might be climbing over or handling. We don't believe that the way that this disease is transmitted has to do much with contact. And so we don't think, you're not gonna have to decontaminate the rocks that the kids are climbing over, and you don't have to decontaminate the stumps that they're sitting on. And so I don't wanna be too cavalier about it, but I think if you're outside, you don't have to be spraying everything down with decontamination spray after they've been out there, after the kids have been out there.
Andy, thank you for that. I definitely have almost daily questions that include exactly that. My colleague has said that we need to spray down all the stumps that the children are sitting on, and is that really true? And so thank you for that clarification. And of course, like, we don't want to be cavalier in this time of pandemic, but thank you. So in terms of other protective guidelines, should you have any of those written already, Owen, Anna, Marie? And I think we'll just take one of you at this point, so it doesn't matter who, but if you have anything written around what COVID protective guidelines should you have in mind thinking about being outdoors?
We don't have, we have state, CDC, state, and supervisory union guidelines, but we need to do that by school. One of the things that we're talking about, though, is common sense. I don't think we need to be crazy, like Andy's saying, that especially if you're outdoors and you're in a pod of 12, you all should know at all times where you've been and what you're touching or who you're near. And so we're going to teach, like, leave it better than you found it. So even in the case of wherever you are, if you're touching your portalette, I'm really not poop focused, but I am a middle school principal.
Great, thank you. So we're gonna just pivot another minute because I think one of the big questions that's been also coming across my desk, and I'm sure a lot of you as well, and I know my colleagues have experienced this, but in thinking about children who have some special needs, and so are looking at differently abled bodies accessing the necessary supports that they need, children with independent educational plans, so IEPs, needing to work with specialist teachers who meet with a group indoors, how to manage some of those things. So Anna, can we start with you and just think about some of your colleagues that you've been working with, and then perhaps Marie, you'll have something to add to that as well.
One of the first things when it comes to that kind of question is focusing on the why. Why are you going outside in nature in the first place? What are those benefits going to be? And then making sure that not only I as a classroom teacher is on board with that, but that the family, the child, and then the specialist. So whether it's the paraprofessional or the early childhood special education teacher, so that they all are all on the same page regarding that why. And then in terms of the individual students, it's hard to, know exactly what you need to do until you have an actual student in front of you with their individual needs. But there's a lot of creative ways to adapt maybe the activity itself or where you're going and what you're doing. So with students, we've had like pond dipping. So they have the little pond nets that are about this long. Well, if a student's in a wheelchair, they're not going to be able to participate in that activity. So we adapt it by putting a long stick to attach to the net, so that the student can still be in the chair and reach the water. And then thinking about where are we accessing the water, and maybe adapting that space or choosing a different space so that that child can get up to the water's edge there. And then in other cases, our one school that I'm at Jeffers Pond does have some inclines. And so with one of our students, we went out and we looked for those natural slopes of where it kind of makes a switchback, so that the student could get up, and we put flag tape so that the student could identify how to get up the hill where their peers were and how to get back down independently. So just kind of taking that extra time to think about that student and their needs. And then in some cases, it might mean you have to actually build a trail and put a path in, but we were able to find those natural spaces already there. So, but the big piece is everyone has to be on board about that why, and then see the educational value, the social emotional value, but then also those academic value too, so that it's not a time for pullout, that those students are part of their class during that time outdoors.
I would totally agree with what Anna is saying. It is very individualized, and you've got to make sure that it's clear as to why you're doing what you're doing. An example that we have done here at the elementary, last year, we were able to do a collaborative project, and you can see behind me the raised beds that were built with the high school outdoor ed group and middle school outdoor ed group, and now are right behind the elementary school. So my elementary school is right here within a stone's throw of where I'm sitting. So we were very intentional about the placement of various items so that they are accessible. So that's one thing that we do. And I would say also, we need to start small. Not everyone is, you know, gung-ho, and sometimes I say things and people look at me like I have 3 heads, and then I have to pull back and say, well, you can just take a walk. I mean, if you really want to, but I think that we really need to meet educators where they are, as well as our paraprofessionals, because they are doing such important work. We want to make sure they feel comfortable and supported in moving forward in this direction. And again, understand the why. Why is it so important to integrate this into what we're already doing?
And I will add, in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools, they did a project last year where the physical therapist and the occupational therapist went around and identified certain students that were kind of having barriers to engaging in time outside and different activities. And then they went to the high school, and the tech class actually made adaptations to things like sand tables and tool usage and things like that. So it was on the high school students to creatively think about how to overcome and adapt the equipment. And then they created it, went through the whole design process, built it, and then gave it back to the students in the schools. So it was a way to use the support within the whole school district.
That's wonderful. We clearly needed this to be a 90-minute session, but I'm watching the chat as some wonderful questions are coming in. I just have another question for you, Dr. Russ, about, and I think that the outdoor educators and those who are excited about this on this panel could answer this with their eyes closed, and I'm sure you can also. But considering the health benefits of being outside besides lowering the risk of infection, what might be some other health benefits that we could consider when talking to either our administrators or the families or other teachers?
Well, in my introduction, I just talked about the emotional health benefits. So I would focus on that. I mean, clearly just being outside, or even being able to glimpse the outside, right, has health benefits. And so if a glimpse is great, then getting out there and enjoying it in all its glory. Oops, sorry, I lost the screen there for a second. You know, there are clearly, you know, all of the sort of the physical health benefits may be obvious, but I would emphasize the social and the emotional health benefits as this is as a solution.
It's wonderful, and a lot of people are very focused on the trauma-informed teaching piece of this as well, and getting outdoors for children's health. And green time is something that we, you know, prescriptions of green time coming from doctors prior to COVID, you know, just as a way to sort of combat anxiety and depression that's been showing up among children. And I will also say among teachers. So a very important part of this is the teachers to consider and the health benefits for them as well. So in addition to that, the physical benefits that we talk about are also the increased immunities that can often happen from being outside. Your resiliency grows, and there's a lot of research to back that up. And I would say that some of that is in the position statement, and there are others that you can dig up pretty quickly. So there are a lot of questions from folks, and I want to just say right off the bat, we're not going to get to all of them. We'll do our best to at least collaborate and get some answers out there to all of you. So this is for Marie specifically. So how do you encourage an educator that isn't outdoorsy to start teaching outdoors? As a PD provider, I always struggle with convincing these folks, this is from a participant, that taking kids outside isn't as daunting as they think. I try to get them to experience the outdoors positively, but how do you reach that back row to get them to just step outside even? So an educator, it sounds like an educator working with other educators, and how do you just convince them to take that first step?
Yeah, I think it is a very fine balance. Again, you know, you need to really work with the comfort level of the teacher, but I think from my standpoint, what I've done as an administrator is there haven't been any mandates. What I've done is encouraged and provided resources for teachers and and allowed it to grow organically. So I'm not heavily focused on those that are not comfortable yet. I'm allowing them, and I'm intentionally highlighting the benefits we're seeing from those that are going outdoors. And little by little over these past 4 years, I would say the amount of interest in this type of learning even before COVID was growing steadily. So I think it requires a lot of patience and also that compassion piece for the adults. A lot of times we can put that on the back burner, and I think we need to be very mindful of teachers and their comfort level and continue to support them so that they can eventually get outside, and allow them to start where they're comfortable and then allow it to grow from there.
Thank you, Marie. There is, I'm sure that everyone on this panel could work to answer that question, but I am going to shift. I was working to answer a question that came in, and I'm going to not answer it and ask it of all of you. Perhaps Anna, just because of your wide-reaching work that you've been doing nationally, I wonder if, or at least Natural Start in some of those places, if you could give any advice in order to encourage schools to move outdoors in hot and humid environments, which clearly Minnesota gets hot and humid in the summertime, so perhaps you can relate there. We happen to have a hot and humid stretch right now in the Northeast, but doesn't happen very often. So this person is in Northeast Florida with not very many progressive thinkers as well. So it sounds like pretty isolated, not a huge team. So any advice for that person and anyone else really living in hot and humid environments?
So when we usually start the school year, it is usually pretty hot and humid, and those are actually more challenging, I think, than the cold, frigid days that we have in the wintertime. So one of the things is starting small. If in order to for this to be positive, you got to listen to your students. If they are miserable when you're outside and you're like, we're staying outside for 6 hours, we're going to get through this, it's going to fail immediately. So start small, think about shade structure. So if you don't have the shade from the natural environment around, think about ways to temporarily put up shade, whether it's tents, like some schools are doing, or maybe even tarps, and finding ways to hook those up and to create that shade area. Water is important, making sure the students are staying hydrated. So having parents, make sure they have their water bottles with them, which is going to mean more access to bathrooms. But again, it's dealing with the main issue there, which is making the students feel comfortable outdoors. And then thinking about the types of activities. So if it's a hot, humid day, you're not going to play a running around game and a high active game. Maybe you're going to be doing some kind of calmer or less active things like nature journaling or a smaller scale observation activities. So structuring your activities. And then the big thing, I think, is find the teachers, and it goes back to that last question, find the teachers that are really on board and get them to do it, because their colleagues are going to see them out there and they're going to join them. So find the ones that are going to do it and are willing, and help support them, and then the rest will follow there. So if they're like, nope, we can't do this, it's not worth that battle. You're not going to make success by kind of forcing it, but instead find those success stories and then start sharing that, whether it's by posting it on Facebook and letting the other people see it, or on Twitter account or something like that, but getting them to realize that there are others around, and then connecting, making those connections and networking.
I could just add a response to that. I haven't had a lot of need for this in Northern Maine, although it is quite hot right now. But when I was a teacher in the school district of Philadelphia, I can tell you that the 3-story buildings were excruciatingly hot, and we were indoors in that heat. And I would just simply get a clean spray bottle from Home Depot and keep it filled with water, and the kids love to get a little spritz now and then. So that's just another piece, a very simple piece to add in that can help keep folks cool.
Yeah, I wonder about you too, Owen, just in convincing reluctant educators to move outdoors. I wonder if you can just speak to that a little bit. And I've been seeing what you've been writing in the chat, and it just might be great to hear your voice and experience.
Yeah, also, and Amy was helpful with this when we first began this 20 years ago, is to get some folks trained, to really get a couple champions and pilot it maybe with one teacher and their classroom, and to really highlight that success and document things like attendance and behavior data, and also any other data that I think kids really thrive on it. And also, their stories really help for folks to hear it. It's also not bad to get a school board member, if you don't have a superintendent or principal, to get some school board members that are really about outdoors and and make sure that they support you. Don't go around your superintendent though, right, Marie? Is that helpful? I know that we're near the end and I don't want to take up a lot of time.
No, that's great. Thank you. I would just say to those folks who've been asking for resources, articles, those kinds of things, webinars, I believe that between Liza Lowe and me and others, we can get a resource page up for you. And I would just say to the panelists, if there are any others, we will reach out to you. You can just send them to me and then we can add to that. So for participants to get in the resources section after this is done. So one quick question I would like to ask all of you, because I think it's very important for us to think about building a bridge to welcome, encourage, and reassure all cultures in outdoor learning. And again, to my panelists in the Northeast, this is something, and actually Dr. Russ, I think your experience in working with schools is important here too. Just for some cultures, the point of school is to have access to jobs and to be professional while you're in school that take place inside. For others, outside strongly associated with dirt and discomfort, families may not have access to additional clothing, etc. So in terms of thinking about opening this to all cultures equitably, what kind of experience have you had there? And perhaps Anna, we could start there.
Yeah, so it goes back to the same thing with students of different abilities, is to really identify the individual families' engagement with nature and their perceptions of nature. So taking time to kind of understand what that means for that family. And then you can plan and work forward with what the barriers might be. So I think about a parent that I had who was a teacher, and he was very traditional based. And so it was school and learning, it was indoors, it was worksheets. And so I'm a preschool teacher, and so we had a lot of conversations about what's developmentally appropriate, and then how is the learning happening, and what is the learning that's happening in the outdoor environment. So taking that extra time to understand what his concerns were allowed me to then cater my message back to him and engage in a conversation back and forth. And then he ended up sending his second child to me. So we were able to have that success. He was able to see the value and then see how that was going to benefit his child in the long run with his goals of education and the future.
Fantastic, thank you. And I wonder, Marie, you came from Philadelphia, so I wonder if you could speak to some of that. And I know you weren't necessarily doing outdoor learning there, although I'm not totally sure. But I bet there was some community-based learning and some outdoor opportunities going on. So if you could speak to that.
We did do some things. I worked in a school that was about 100% African-American population, and some very challenging home lives that kids came from. And one of the things, we did have a wildlife refuge that was nearby. So that was one of the field trips that I had taken kids to. And it was evident that, that there was a disconnect, and that really helped me to understand better those cultural needs at that point, and begin to explain and kind of, share the why, and what are these things in nature, and because they had unfortunately been quite foreign. We had also done an initiative to look at the litter and really focus in on, how do we clean up our environment and why is that important? So those were some of the entry points that I had, looked at in Philadelphia.
So fantastic. And Owen, no doubt you have other things to add to this. I will just highlight that Owen said happy kids telling stories on social media, is a really important point, because we want happy kids telling great stories. And so I really wish it wasn't noon. And I know, Marie, you have another obligation. I'm sure everyone has things to do. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to the four of you for your input, for your insight, for your incredible experience with this work as we embark together on this journey. It reminds me of this book I'm reading right now called On Trails by Rob Moore. And when I think about those visionary ants whose trails gets broken and one starts to go on a new trail, and then the others will follow. And so I think of all of you in terms of insect communities and others. So Owen, do you want to say a closing remark? It's wonderful. You're muted right now, though.
Go outside.
Go outside, I'll say. Marie's already there. I hope you can continue to be. And thank you.
I have to go. Now I have to go in, but that's okay. I've gotten my time.
Great. Thank you all so much. And thanks again to NAAE and the Natural Start Alliance, and to my colleagues in Inside Outside for writing that position statement. So here we go. Let's do it. Thank you.